Welcome to This Time in History, guys. This is the Ward 9 virtual debate, the Ward 9 Davenport debate. I am your host, Matthew, of the podcast This Time in History. With me, as always, is my co-host, my partner in crime, Ebony.
Hello.
And welcome to all the participants. One at a time, I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about, why you're running and maybe a couple platform points, whatever you can fit into about 2-3 minutes. Alejandra, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Simon, and Shakar, you can finish that off. Go ahead, Alejandra.
Thank you. So I'm running for city council in this important election where we can see the provincial government is once again meddling in Toronto's decision-making powers. I'm here because for more than 20 years, I've been working in this community. I've been working on transit, affordable housing, building alongside people. And I think that even though the powers of councillors are going to be reduced now because of the strong mayor legislation that has been passed by Doug Ford, the city councillor is an important convener, a facilitator of civic groups, social movements. That's the approach that I'm going to bring to this office. There's a lot of community knowledge, a lot of demands that have been pent up over the year. And what we need now is a sense of urgency around the things that are most important in the city, restore a sense of human rights and dignity. And that to me is housing, transit, and different budget priorities, honestly, at the city.
Thank you so much. Simon, go ahead.
So my background's in geography. I studied geographic analysis at Ryerson. I spent 5 years doing decision support within the city's cycling unit. I cycle just about everywhere. And I got a compounding sense of frustration at the sort of broken telephone concepts there. It seemed like anytime I'd complete a project and hand it up the ladder, they'd say, great, we'll get back to you. I said, what are you gonna do with this? And they kind of didn't. And it was like that a lot, and so lockdown happened. I got laid off, and I saw that government really can move fast if it suits their purposes, right? It seems like our lives are so micromanaged, and yet at the same time, government doesn't seem to get anything substantive done in terms of delivering infrastructure and providing a high quality of public services that we all pay for. So I'd like to see a focus on short-term deliverables for transit. So having more BRT and bus lanes and having more creative solutions to get those vehicles moving faster and more frequently. I'd also like to see some creative financing involved. I think that relying exclusively on, or almost exclusively on taxes and user fees for municipal revenues is short-sighted. What I'd like to see is the city invest in municipal real estate in a substantive manner. So starting with TTC stations, start leasing out retail space within the concourses, and then from there, build the portfolio and manage it professionally within the city's bureaucracy. So I've been a long time political watcher. This is my first time running for the city. I ran provincially in June for MPP as an independent. So I'm quite happy to put my hat in the ring and just get out there in the public and having public conversations of what kind of public spaces we want to see, because in a democracy, it's all bottom up, ideally. It shouldn't be top down. So the citizens are the ones who should be making decisions about how they run their lives and how their city is being built.
Thank you so much, Simon. Shakar, sorry. Shakar, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries, Matthew. You're not alone. I mean, it's one of those names that can be pronounced like a million different ways.
You should just shorten it to Shaq. There.
Yeah, I used to get that a little bit in school actually, and a whole bunch of other ones too. But yeah, I'll keep that in mind. But anyways, I don't fault you, so don't worry about it. But yeah, Shaqer. Anyways, thank you for having me here. Really appreciate it. It's always great to see Alejandra. Nice to meet you, Simon. And yeah, a little bit as to why I'm running. I mean, whenever I get asked that question, my answer says twofold. First and foremost, in 2020, me and my brother, just as the pandemic was beginning, we were forced out of our house, our rental home, when it sold for this ungodly amount of $2 million. It was a place that we had rented out for 6-7 years. It was the first place in Davenport that I lived in, and we got forced out of the community as a result of the real estate boom. You know, this unfettered, crazy skyrocketing financialization of housing, and to have really experienced that kind of precarious housing, and to, after having read about it, worked in it, and studied it, to have actually felt what it feels like to lose your home and to be forced out, was really kind of eye-opening. And it was infuriating to know that the counselor at that time was the quote-unquote chair of the housing committee. And that was one of the real galvanizing factors towards me really wanting to put my name forward, because I just felt like that just wasn't right and just wasn't up to snuff. Secondly, I became a new dad actually last year. Sorry, you know, once you become a parent, like your whole conception of time just totally flips out. But became a new dad 16 months ago, and that was another really kind of galvanizing factor, to really have a kid and to know that, you know, this city is evolving in a way in which our priorities are totally out of whack. And I think Alejandro would probably share this. Simon, I can't really speak too much about this, but it's absurd that we live in a city where we waste $6 million a year on police forces, but you know, we cannot have washrooms in a park open or water fountains. Our priorities are totally out of whack, and to see the city evolve in this way is something that I can't stand by and let it happen, because this is something that's going to impact our future generations, and it's impacting people now. It's going to disproportionately impact people that come from non-privileged backgrounds, like me and my son. We do not come from money. We do not come from status. We do not come from influence. And a lot of Torontonians don't, but it increasingly feels like it's a city built for those people. So these are two of the reasons why I really decided to put my name forward and to really champion progressive ideas rooted in sensible public policy. I've had the experience, having worked both at the municipal level, provincial level, and now working as in the non-governmental level, has given me really kind of a fulsome, comprehensive overview of some of the things that really ail us as a society. So that's why I've decided to run.
Thank you so much. And so now we'll start with our sets of questions. The first set, Ebony, you can choose which set we want to go. Let's save City Hall for last.
All right.
But you can choose which one you want to go first, and then ask your question, and I'll ask mine, and then we'll switch it up. So we'll have Simon go first. We'll have Shaker second, and Alejandro will finish it off. Go ahead, Ebony.
Well, I'm also a renter and a parent. So I think let's start with the housing crisis.
Good idea.
We need to do to get more homes. Where are we going to put the affordable housing? Where is it going to come from? I would like to hear some out of the box ideas.
And my question would be, would you support rent freezes and or legalization of rooming houses? Go ahead, Simon.
So do you want the question first about how to have more housing, or the second set?
Whatever you want to answer
Okay.
first. It's up to you.
All right. So I suppose that the backbone of my housing platform is that we have an artificial scarcity of housing in the city. The zoning restrictions make it so that most of the city, you cannot build enough housing for people to live in. So there is competition over the housing, especially rental housing. And as a result, the cost of housing keeps rising. It doesn't have to be this way. There's no real reason other than simply legislative dictates that says that you can't build a third or fourth story on your own property, that says you can't add a laneway house to your own property for to rent out to renters, right? And this lack of supply, it causes a lot of anxiety, right? Because when you have several renters or several prospective renters competing over the same property, it gives the landlord incentive to find reasons to evict people, right? Whether they're legal or whether they're illegal, it doesn't seem to make a difference, because when you're scrambling, trying to figure out your life, you don't necessarily have the time to go through these legal processes to figure out what your rights are, how much it costs, how much time it's going to take. And that's all assuming, of course, that you are proficient in English and that you're educated and that you're an assertive enough person to go and fight for yourself. I mean, if you're a new immigrant and you're still learning the language and you don't quite know the legal system here, it can be very intimidating. So there's a lot that can be improved with getting more housing built. So what I'd like to see is for a citywide upzoning to residential multiple. So there's multiple categories of residential zoning. Much of the city is residential detached, and up there is residential semi-detached, residential townhouse, residential multiple. Residential multiple is multiplexes up to 4 stories. So I think this is a reasonable, place to arrive at. And it's not going to, overshadow the whole, city with towers everywhere and, masses of crowds. But the fact is that we don't have enough housing for people to live. So government needs to get out the way and allow it to be built. And further to this, you need to liberalize zoning more generally so that you don't have restrictions on where you can set up a storefront, where you can set up a retail operation, where you can set up a cafe or a restaurant. My theory is that as long as it doesn't produce pollution or noise, it's not some massive industrial site, there's no reason why it shouldn't be built wherever the spatial logic dictates. Regarding rooming houses, yes, to this end, of course, I would legalize rooming houses. There are many, many people who are already living in illegal rooming houses. I'm pretty sure the rooming house I lived in when I first moved out of my parents' place was illegal. I mean, pretty much everybody I knew that lives in a rooming house lives in one that's illegal, and they don't have the necessary legal protections that come from that. They simply take what they can afford because the alternative is living on the street. And when government says, oh no, you can't live in this manner because it's, I don't know what they want to say, undignified or bad for the neighborhood character. It's not to your best interest in to say you can't live this way when your alternative is living on the streets. Regarding rent freezes, I think those are counterproductive because it doesn't provide incentives for people to provide rental housing. What we need are fewer barriers to providing rental housing because otherwise it's not going to get done. We simply don't have a realistic public budget to build rental housing by the state.
Thank you so much, Simon. Shagar, you're up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, housing is something that's very near and dear to me. It's not simply a political issue for me to be standing on a soapbox about, nor am I implying others are here. But I mean, like I spent part of my childhood in public housing when we first came to Canada. Like part of my childhood, I grew up on welfare. We grew up in a public house. That's how we got our start in Canada. That's the home that I left every day to go to school and to come back home to. So it's something that's very near and dear to me. And it's also something that kind of really galvanized this political journey that I'm on for the next 23 days. Having lost my rental on Armstrong Avenue, just south of Galleria Mall, was a really strong impetus to step up and to put my name forward and to see, share some of the ideas that I have. In particular to your question, Matthew, about the ideas that I have around affordable housing. I mean, my platform is pretty expansive on it, but I'll just touch on 3 of the topics. 1, the city right now lacks any sort of independent oversight on it. I don't think anyone here can point right now to who is actually responsible for ensuring that affordable housing is delivered. It's very easy to pass that buck at City Hall right now. As somebody who came from the Toronto Public Service, I know the mess that it is. I know the mess that organizationally it is. So to solve that, I really want to lobby to create an independent housing commissioner. It's clear we need a new social contract on housing, one that ensures that our right to housing is protected. Because right now it's not. Because if it was, I don't think I would have been kicked out of that house. I don't think thousands of other people would have been kicked out of that house. I think people would be struggling with skyrocketing rent right now, or insanely overpriced homes, or a lack of accessibility to co-ops or non-market options. Secondly, housing bonds. I think, whenever I kind of mention this to people, it's kind of interesting, and this touches a little bit on Simon's point that the city right now lacks that budget, and this is one of those ways to address that. I propose that the city of Toronto issues $1 billion in housing-only bonds to reinvest in housing, to reinvest in our communities, and to reinvest in our people. We do that right now. We issue green bonds, we issue social bonds. Portland, a city that is 1/4 the size of Toronto, just issued 211 million USD in housing bonds. If a city 1/4 our size can issue 300 something million Canadian dollars in housing bonds, what do you think Toronto can do? with just a little bit of impetus and, you know, some courage to actually take a new and novel approach. So that's my second proposal. My third proposal is to cut the red tape. Again, something kind of that Simon, I think, was touching on there. Right now, it's stifling at City Hall. I've seen it. It's absurd that it takes 8 to 10 years for a new development to be built. And of that, 3 to 5 years of that is just paperwork being processed at City Hall. That's crazy. Why are we spending over 1,000 days trying to approve a housing project? Like, what do you think is happening in those 5 years? Costs are going up, right? People are being priced out. Some people might be forced onto the streets. Why? Partially because it takes 3 to 5 years for paperwork at City Hall. That is crazy. And that is something we need to tackle. So those would be my 3 policy proposals as to how to address housing, the lack of affordable housing. I have much more on my platform, but you know, I don't want to be rambling here. So that's where I'll end it off at.
Thank you so much. Alejandra, you're up.
Yeah, I think I'll start with the rooming houses. I live in this neighborhood. There are lots of rooming houses. So Davenport's had legal rooming houses for a long time, and I think that the failure of council to pass the harmonized rooming house bylaw so that people can be protected across the city is just an example of how things have to change. And I would say that the big buckets for me are create more homes that people can afford, protect renters, you know, really advance real action, which I think, you know, right, like Shocker talked about, a sort of commissioner to oversee housing, and that's been a demand of right to housing, which is an important campaign in the city. I support that as well. And then I'm just going to touch on issues around the market and whether the market is going to solve these things. So in terms of making it easier and accelerating the builds, we need like 1.4 million new homes in the next 29 years. That to me means ending exclusionary zoning, and so that we can actually build more intense neighborhoods with townhomes, duplexes, etc., in every part of the city. To me, it means increasing as of right height and density allowances when people want to produce rental buildings, especially close to transit stations, waiving permitting and fees to support new affordable housing, like everyone's been saying, that's got to move a lot faster. And then make sure that inclusionary zoning is really providing, you know, I think a much greater percentage than 10% of deeply affordable units within every build. And the great thing about that is that you know, if it's privately owned in a condominium, those units could be owned by not-for-profits who could give support to the tenants. And you know, and if it's rental, then that's absolutely essential. And it has to. The city already has a policy that where things are stalled at the provincial level. But that policy only passed because of people power, and I'm really happy to have been involved deeply with that campaign. So there's a lot more, like, you know, I think people have talked about reform the zoning restrictions that, you know, don't allow independent and small business and small retail and residential buildings to thrive. In terms of tenants, I think like the long request of Acorn, which represents 140,000 people in Canada with moderate and low income, to have a sort of like a rent safe TO, like a dine safe TO, landlord licensing scorecard, I think is really important. It's an important demand, and I support that. You know, there's a lot of conditions that renters are experiencing that aren't getting protections, like in heat waves and maximum allowable temperature, you know, and a lot of it has to do with obviously provincial decisions, but being really forceful around vacancy decontrol and, you know, the renovictions that are happening. I note that in the Lower Mainland in BC, they've got some pretty stronger renoviction language, and that's absolutely essential. And I'll say, like, I was at the Stop Community Food Center in the community a few days ago. After 2 years, people were dancing and celebrating, and one of the advocates for like rental advocates was there, and he makes sure that when tenants are facing problems like eviction, he speaks up for them at tribunals and walks them through the process. Well, he got evicted and he can't live in Davenport anymore. And from my perspective, I have 3 kids. They're older, but my 2 eldest kids live in Montreal, and they're never going to be able to come back to Toronto under these conditions. And that, that's a really difficult situation. I myself have been a refugee, and I lived in, I got to live in a co-op. That was a really important step for my family. And so I think like the types of ownership matter. There are people out there that are saying that the market will solve everything, and I don't agree with that. If that were the case, food prices wouldn't have gone up like up to 100% in the last little while. I think we need to have a restored role for all levels of government to provide and to invest in housing. So like the creation of land trusts is really important. Accelerating the city's multi-unit residential acquisition program for nonprofit housing, et cetera. Legalizing multi-tenant housing, absolutely essential. And also let's not forget that we need to put money into emergency housing needs. Around fighting real estate speculation, as Shocker talked about, the financialization of housing is a huge problem. And we had a big victory with a lot of different organizations getting the vacant home tax, but it's at 1%, and we need to get it to 3%, like in Vancouver, and that's going to fight the kind of speculation that it happens, like raising the land transfer tax for real estate investors. I think when it's not their primary residence, and then there's some other important measures that the city can take to fight speculation, because we also can't forget that there's tech and Airbnb, et cetera, that we have to contend with. So all these things are important and multi-pronged, and we have some really great leadership here in Davenport around this.
Thank you so much. And now the floor is open to debate this topic. Jump in wherever you like.
I'm realizing now I didn't say quite enough. I'm making myself sound like a bit too much of a libertarian. I fully agree that financialization is an issue. I mean, we have, at the same time as a restricted supply, we have an artificially inflated demand, right? So we do have speculation, right? We do have people that are taking advantage of what should be a place to live and turning it into a vehicle of investment. And I think that we over rely on the land transfer tax. And I think that raising it further would create even more of a problem, because we'd be further tied into escalating property values, property costs, right? So I remember a few years ago going to a talk by Chris Murray, who was at the time, I think he was at the time the city manager, and he was sounding the alarm about the land transfer tax, where how much we over rely on it. And he said, well, if we ever see any kind of correction in the housing market, the city's financially done. We can't afford to keep, paying for services from financial tools that rely on property costs being out of reach of more and more people. So yeah, I would like to see the vacant home tax go up. I mean, we shouldn't have homes being sitting empty, people aren't living in. So, if a unit sits empty, it should be taxed if it's not being used for housing. Regarding an independent oversight,
I think you're frozen.
Is that while Simon's frozen, sorry, I didn't mean to imply that you sounded libertarian, but I think it's a good chance to say that we need to look at housing as a human right. And, in other parts of the world, it's social and economic rights are protected in the constitutions, and it's not in our charter. But that move is really important. And so a big part of this is not criminalizing homelessness, which is what's happening in this city.
Sorry, Simon, you got cut off there. You were frozen. Go ahead and finish your point.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, housing bonds, right? That's what I was going to talk about. So, yeah, this is an excellent idea. I don't think the market alone can supply the housing needs we do, but it doesn't mean that we have to simply have housing being built, by the state and having. Well, we currently can't even maintain the housing we have. I mean, Swansea Mews was condemned. Like, I grew up around a corner from there. Half my friends were living at Swansea Mews. I don't remember it having ceilings that cave in, but evidently there's been a lot of neglect over the years of those properties, and it's going to cost a lot to repair them. And if we can't afford to repair the properties we have, how can we build new ones? So I think issuing housing bonds to partner with the market, so to speak, would help to get a lot more housing built. My position is I don't really care how it gets done. I don't want the rent to keep increasing. Like, I lived in my current unit for 8 years. I'm paying well below market rate. I got to leave next month. I'm kind of panicking, honestly, because I don't know quite what I'll be able to afford. And I don't want more people to be in that situation. I mean, Shaker, you lost your housing, because of this financialization. Whoever's buying the current property I live in, I'm not sure what their intentions for it are, but I don't quite trust that they're operating in good faith. And we shouldn't have to be in a position where we're so skeptical and cutthroat with our neighbors over simple matters of how we're going to keep a roof over our head, right? We don't have to be in this position. I think having a flexible approach, not having so many restrictions to getting more housing built, and at the same time, not having a hands-off, total free-for-all approach would certainly work. But I don't quite trust the idea of the state building housing. At the same time, I don't quite trust the idea of housing being left to be a total speculative venture. I think there needs to be a hybrid model of approaches.
Thank you.
Just on that note, I mean, nonprofits are becoming increasingly powerful developers. If you think about St. Clair's, and there's a building on Sudbury, and I did a tour there not long ago, and it was incredible because there's deeply affordable units, and then there's market units. It's been developed by a not-for-profit. And the cool thing for me is that the people that are paying market rent don't know who's being highly supported. And those people have multiple needs, so they're being supported with social workers, et cetera. So I think one thing we're all kind of implying here is that we need to have mixed income communities. And I think that's really powerful. On the question of what the city can do, I mean, I get really inspired when I look at US cities. I really wish that in Canada that cities were recognized in the Constitution, because we can't even run our own elections. And so it's really without having provincial interference. So that's something that it's important for all of us to get on the same page about, I think, as advocates, that we need to be able to have more say. The province tells the city what it can and can't do, and what it must do. And so they're really running the show, and that's a problem.
Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to move to our second set, which is crime. Ebony, go ahead.
Am I on? Not muted? Yeah. Okay. So I would like to hear what your ideas might be to help reduce crime in communities, but without increasing a police presence. So, I want to hear, like urban design, maybe, like what kind of programs, how can you support the community to get to the root of the problem of crime? Think outside the box again.
And my question would be, so one of the mayoral candidates, if he wins, he wants to bring back carding as a tool for the Toronto Police to use. How do you respond to this, and why? We started with Simon last time, so let's start with Alejandra, and then Shaq, and then Simon, you can finish us off.
Shocker.
Sorry, shocker.
That's all I'll say it.
Thank you, Alejandra.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, I mean, the police budget is the only budget that continues to grow. And I find it amazing that even though there has been an increase in violence, and particularly youth violence and involvement of youth in crime, that there isn't like a lot of attention compared to previous waves. So I think that, first of all, we need to find more money. We need to refund community by detasking police officers. They shouldn't be. There's a bunch of work that they do that they shouldn't be doing. Chief among them is, crisis intervention. There's a lot of work that officers are being asked to do that could be done by social workers, by public health workers, other first responders, experts, not-for-profit workers. So that's essential. There's also like, for a long time I got involved with Art Starts in the community arts in 2004. And on Oakwood, there was shootings, and this had been a response that came out to provide not just sort of recreation opportunities, but for community building opportunities through community arts. It's been really effective, and it's worked in the most underserved areas of the city over the years. And I left the board. I'm still a supporter, but I've seen with my eyes what it means to have like peer-to-peer outreach. And the sweet spot is sort of reaching to people around, call them people because they are like 10 to 12, 10 to 14. So in the 80s, some of you might remember, if you were alive or not, that Toronto there was a gang problem and a youth violence problem in Toronto. And there were people, I know lots of people that were gang involved in my community. And I have been around a lot of people who've been gang involved in my life, or enough to say that there was some really important work that was done at that time. And there's a veteran of the city of Toronto, a worker who I talk to regularly. He still hangs out at Christie Pitts Park and talks to the young people. He was given a budget just to invite kids with a second an adult to go and get some snacks and talk. And that was such a powerful piece of social infrastructure, and all of that's been cut. So I think that, when we want to attack violence and crime, the built form matters, redesigning communities so that so that they can actually have street access everywhere, developing a more educational opportunities, good jobs, job programs in communities where there's lack of jobs, public spaces, convening spaces, more libraries, making sure that libraries can offer a whole suite of services, investing in, there's a mental health strategy and a youth strategy that's, none of that is like funded at the City of Toronto right now. But people need support and they need opportunity. They need connection. And I think we need to start there. Something I'm really passionate about. And I think we have to listen to the people that are actually experiencing violence. And a lot of them know what the answers are. And I think City Council should get behind those initiatives.
Thank you
Beautiful.
so much.
Yep.
Shaker, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's clear, like our approach to policing is broken, right? I mean, 10% of the city identifies as Black. You know how many people, how many of those folks unfortunately represent people who are arrested, ticketed, or cautioned, or for whatever reason stopped by cops? 25%. 1 in 4 people who are stopped by cops are Black, but yet they only make up 10% of our city. Like, you can't ignore that stat. And it might just seem like a stat, you might try to ignore it, but for me, I can't. I mean, my nephew is Black, he's half Black. But when he comes across a cop, no cop is going to give a crap that he's half Black. He looks Black, that cop is going to treat him like he's Black. And what that means, he's more likely to unfortunately be treated in a way that's very different than from you, Matthew, or than from you, Simon, or than possibly from me or from Alejandra, And that's messed up and that's scary. So we may talk about this as a policy issue, but people live this. I mean, I know we have someone here on this call who comes from that community. So, I mean, I can't be standing on a soapbox and grandstanding too much about this, but it's a real problem in the city. And the fixes aren't rocket science. You don't need a PhD in sociology to fix it. I don't think any of us here do. If someone does, I apologize for not recognizing that. But I mean, a $1.1 billion budget has not fixed it. It's bloated, it's grotesque, it needs to be right-sized downwards, and we need to axe extraneous spending. I identified earlier $6 million on police sources. In what universe do we need $6 million to spend on cop horses in downtown Toronto? So what I want to see happen is I want to see that fully axed. I want to see that. I want to see our communities refunded. I want to see our communities refunded by, I don't know, let's build some water fountains. Let's build some washrooms. Or another more pertinent way is to fully fund our Toronto Community Crisis Service, the TCSS, right? The pilot project, which is a great initiative by the City of Toronto. But right now it's a pilot project of multidisciplinary teams that go to answer, crisis response scenarios, right? We don't need a cop with a gun when someone has that kind of issue or is unfortunately experiencing that issue. We need a social worker. We need maybe an RN. We need, I don't know, maybe a sociologist. I don't know. We need someone else that doesn't have a freaking gun when someone is unfortunately in their own challenges, in their own distress. Like,
Agreed.
you
Maybe
know?
like a traditional therapist or a psychologist. I agree entirely. What far too many I don't want to call them accidents because that would imply that, it wasn't prevented, but it definitely could be incidents where people are clearly suffering mental health, just like they're distraught, they're having an outburst, and violence just escalates matters. When you even see a police officer, so I might have a panic attack just from seeing one. It mind I'm already having a panic attack or having a meltdown. That's definitely gonna not help me calm down.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe just because I'm a woman, but if you tell me to calm down, I am certainly going the other direction. And the amount of ill people who are put in jail could definitely be deflated, let alone the amount of people who have actually died at the hands of officers. I think we need more social workers for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, and the thing is with the TCSS, sorry, I always get tripped up on like all these acronyms. I think I got that one right. It's a pilot project right now, and Davenport is one of the communities where we have that out right now. I want to see that formalized. I want to see that budget expanded. That's a budget that needs to expand, not the cops. We've already seen what they can do and what they can't do with $1.1 billion. So that would be my response to the question.
Thank
Beautiful.
you. Simon, you're up.
Okay, good. We have connection. Nobody's voice is jittering around.
No, we can hear.
All right. Okay, you can hear me. Okay. So I think a lot of the discourse around crime, it gets sort of, the lines all get blurred about different types of crime. Certainly a lot of destructive behavior is done by people who don't need police intervention, but they need sustainable mental health treatment. Like I have a family member who has a severe mental illness. It's undiagnosed, but he routinely destroys his parents' home, assaults his partner, assaults his mother, goes on outbursts in public places that result in police calls. We can't be naive about the fact that people like this can often be dangerous. But at the same time, simply having a police intervention that ends when the immediate danger ends, and no simple follow-up about, okay, why is he behaving like this? What's going on in his brain? How can we fix it? We need to see more of that, right? You go to CAMH, you say, I need to check myself in, I'm a danger to myself and others. They're going to hold you for 48, 72 hours. They're not going to have any follow-up plan with you. And if you're there, against your will because your own family called the authorities because they were not safe to have you around, it's even worse because then, you're back out with a plan for revenge. We need to see like actual follow-up in our mental health system. It's not right to continue having people living like this. This also relates to domestic violence. There doesn't seem to be any real follow-up there. Like, there's the saying that a restraining order is only as powerful as its enforcement. And unfortunately, we see time and time again, a woman calls the police to take their abusive partner away, have a restraining order. Maybe they've managed to escape somewhere. If they have somewhere to go, and that's another issue too, is that we don't have enough supports for people trying to escape domestic violence and to build their lives after domestic violence. Is the cops say, oh, okay, well, call us, there's a problem. It's meanwhile like, yeah, guy shows up again. Where's the follow-up, right? Is that a priority one? It should be, because someone's life could be in danger right then and there, right? It's treated in such a naive way, it seems, right? And I think that often, I don't disagree with this idea of expanding the MCIT. We absolutely should. It should be available 24/7, all over the place for people in distress. But we can't be naive that sometimes people who are mentally ill can be dangerous to their loved ones and to the general public. So I think the police officer with a gun should be available there if and when it's needed. It should not be the first resort. This scenario that happened on the streetcar in 2013 with Sami Yatim, holding a knife, and the immediate instance, of course, was that he was dangerous to the public because he was waving a knife around on a streetcar. But when the police finally showed up and the situation was contained, he wasn't threatening anybody. He was pacing around yelling insults. And the James Porcillo, the police officer, he shot him not because he was afraid. He shot him because he was insulted. And that's just obscene. We can't have situations like that unfold. So I'm very much in favor of having every police officer wear a body camera, both for the sake of transparency in police interactions and for the sake of public safety. Like nothing that our law enforcement does that isn't, high level investigations into organized crime should be a secret of the public. Like I've got a friend who works in analytics in the police, and he's often vague about what he's allowed to tell me, but he says that this problem with the carjackings, it really is a big international thing. And I think that those kinds of treatments in police work are absolutely necessary, right? We can't have crime being a economic sector, right? But we also can't have the sort of internal struggles of people be resorted to by just violence, nothing else. Like we need to have sustained treatment of people that have issues with controlling their emotions, as a result, issues with controlling their behavior. There is no simple answer in this, right? There's no, easy slogan, right, about any of this. You simply have to have a nuanced approach. And I think, having more programs for youth available is absolutely necessary, because that helps to stop the pipeline into organized crime. Like if you have, young men, teenagers who have something to do, productively, that makes them feel included, like this shinny at Wallace Emerson, right? Like it's insane that they're getting rid of that. Like I remember working there when I was at 18. And I think this is great. Like you have these grown men mentoring these young boys, these young
You're frozen, Simon.
kids, and just like, so that's that.
You're
Oh,
frozen. It's okay. Maybe that's for Matt to say. Ebony, not me.
No, you're good. You can continue your thought, and then you guys will be able to debate. I just would love to hear, because none of you answered the
that's
question
what I
about
wanted
carding.
I
But
wanted to jump in there.
I'll let Simon finish, and then you can jump in, Alejandra. Simon? Oh, he's frozen. Go ahead, Alejandra.
Yeah, so absolutely, carding is a violation of human rights, and absolutely cannot allow. It should, and in some ways it continues for people, because there's still too many stops, and that's it violates people's rights of mobility and civil and political rights. I started protesting this kind of ill treatment in the late 80s, early 90s. And, at the time it was also a lot of strip searches of women, like Black women, Latinas. And it's a continual problem. I would say this, that when the police finally admitted, when the chief issued that apology, which isn't what people want. They want a change of behavior. They want, and for many people, they want abolition. It's something that communities have been saying for decades, and we need to listen. But I do want to highlight that there's a lot of different kinds of crime, and I'm glad that Simon talked about violence against women. It's one of the only kinds of crime that really increases. There's all kinds of there are property crimes, but there's also crime prevention is from my point of view, is actually decriminalizing all drugs. That has been done in Portugal. It starts the pipeline of organized crime. And I think everything from redesigning streets, so that, because there's a lot of crimes against pedestrians and cyclists. And so it's not just this one kind of crime. And I just want to highlight that, that human rights can't be violated. And I was involved in the removal and pushing for the removal, for example, of officers in schools because kids felt unsafe there. But we got to be uncategorical and not back down around.
Thank you so much. Shaker, if you wanted to respond, and then Simon, you can finish off your thought.
Actually,
Yeah,
hold,
I came in when she started talking about decriminalizing drugs. So, yes. Okay, go ahead.
also, hold on, sorry, just time out
Yeah.
for a second. Alejandro, we wanted to be mindful of the time. When did you have to leave again?
I'm supposed to go at 5 too, but I don't want to ruin things for everyone else. So
Well, that's okay. Why don't we just hold on and for the questions for a second? Why don't we let you exit? If
Okay.
you're going to go, give us the little bit of the summary of your platform, why we should vote for you, and where we can find you on social media.
great. So website is bravodavenport.ca. Follow Instagram and Twitter at Bravo Davenport. I think people should vote. First of all, we're going to have a low voter turnout election, I fear. I'm here to serve, and I'm here to challenge the way that things have been done at City Hall. This is a community campaign, so it's not just about me, it's about all of the people that are out there knocking on doors and working. I encourage people to vote for anybody that they want to, including the people here. They look at everyone and think about who it is that can be a progressive voice and vote at council and be a champion for workers and communities in the city. So appreciate the chance to have been here, and I wish you all a continued great conversation tonight. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank you for
much.
adding your voice to the tapestry here. We really enjoyed hearing from you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, so Simon, sorry to you off there, and thank you for coming back. I saw you were having some technical difficulties.
I lost
Also-
connection. Yeah, going back.
all right, Mint, the floor is yours.
Okay, me?
You were saying something when I cut you off, no?
Yes. I was asked if I condemn carding, and then I was cut off before I could say that I do condemn
You were
carding.
talking about decriminalizing drugs is what you were saying.
And then you were, and then,
Alejandro was talking about decriminalizing drugs. I was going to say I support that.
Right.
From a personal autonomy perspective, I support it. I think that we should have available to everyone who needs it, free of charge, real sustained drug rehabilitation programs, so people can get clean. Like harm reduction, clean needles and a supervised site is not enough, right? Like if you don't have the resources to get yourself, out of that cycle, then all you're doing really is keeping yourself alive, and that's not good enough for our society. We shouldn't have hundreds or thousands or who knows how many people whose lives are just a daily cycle of self-destruction. We should be able to give them the resources they need to get themselves right and to get them in a position where they don't feel the need to destroy themselves like that. It's awful. I mean, I think honestly, if we ever do tackle drug addiction in a real way, it's because we tackled every other problem that our society has. It's a Pandora's box, drugs. I mean, it was obviously better if they were never invented in the first place, but that's not possible, right? That's not possible to uninvent something. So regarding carding, I wholeheartedly condemn such a practice. Anything that involves police hassling random people just walking around minding their own business with no probable cause, especially when its application is racist, is not only unethical, but it's counterproductive to fighting crime. Someone whose only interactions with police have been hostile is not about to go to them with useful information on investigations. And that's what police's job is. It's investigating crimes to figure out what exactly happened, to figure out, who is responsible, because you don't see a crime in progress. You have to figure out from the information you have available what exactly happened, right? And if the people in the community, their only interaction with you as a police officer is that you're there to hassle them, to give them a hard time, to harass them over whatever, when you don't have probable cause to do so, they're not going to help you. So it's going to be a consistent cycle of crime, and it doesn't help. Even putting aside the fact it is unethical, it's racist, it's just wrong, but it doesn't work.
thank you so much.
Agreed.
Go ahead, Shaker.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Before I do answer the question, I just want to inquire a little bit about timing, because One of our neighbors across the street asked us if we could sit in to watch her kid for her while she kind of runs out to do something. So in about 15 minutes or so, I agreed to do that. So I'm wondering how much longer we'll be going on for here.
Well, so we have one set of questions left. So once you respond here, we'll
Sure.
start that set, and then you can answer those questions and then do your closing, and then yeah, we'll go from there.
Great. Well, I appreciate that flexibility on your part. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify and to kind of further elaborate on carding. I mean, I don't want to be the guy who says always like, I know what this is like. I know what this is like. But in this case, I kind of know what this is like, not necessarily carding per se, but I know what it's like to feel to be targeted by representatives of the state security apparatus, police or whatnot because of your identity, right? I mean, I was a Muslim kid who grew up in the post 9/11 era. I know what it felt like when me and my mom, I grew up originally in Vancouver, we would fly to California very often to go see our family down in the Bay. And I know what it felt like to see my dad picked out of the line and to be pulled aside and to be just interrogated. I know what it felt like for myself when somebody's scanning through my passport and they just see Afghanistan and like, over here, please. And, I've got my belt taken off. I've got my shoes taken off. They're swabbing my books. They're swabbing my pencils, my pens, everything else. And I'm looking down the line that's 98% white. And I'm like, interesting, So no, it's not exactly the example of carding, but I know what that feeling feels like when you are unfairly treated by society, representatives, quote unquote, representatives of society. So it's a grotesque practice. It's a racist practice. It has no place in our society. I think Simon did an excellent job illustrating, the intricacies of crime, the different forms in which it takes. But to specifically answer carding, I mean, I don't know. What do you want to hear? Like 1,000,000% no? That's my answer.
Yeah.
That works. Okay, so the last set of questions is the City Hall culture or cleaning up City Hall. Ebony has a question. I actually have two. I hope you have time to answer all three. The second question that I have recently just came up in the matter of a few days. Go ahead, Ebony, and then I'll ask.
Yep. All right. Well, firstly, I want to say thank you for being part of that tapestry, Shaker, and taking care of your neighbors like that. I need more of that in this world. People being the village that it takes to raise kids.
Oh yeah, it definitely does.
That takes a lot. We don't have that over here in this Western society. So I want to know if you feel that these city councilors, like on top of making pretty decent salaries, they're getting these perks, parking passes, free TTC passes, recreational park passes, like for the zoo too, and housing allowances. Like, is that too much? Do we need to cut the gravy train?
And then my question would be, just a few days ago, we've seen a sitting councillor criminally charged. Should he be able to continue or should he resign? And then my other question was, we have a public outcry to fire Tracy Cook for her role in the clearing of the encampments. How do you respond to this and why? And because of time, we'll go to Shaker first, and you can do your closing after that. And then Simon, you can finish this whole thing off and take as long as you want.
That sounds unfair.
Well, you can have as long as you can spare too.
Fair enough.
I'll go on for hours. It'll be a total rant. Yeah. You're gonna love it. You're gonna see this guy's all over the place.
No, but you're good, man. You're very detail oriented, so I appreciate that. Okay, so while you guys were talking, I kind of wrote down all the parts, so hopefully I can answer it. If I've missed one, please prompt me to answer it. One part was not the question, but I do want to clarify one of your assumptions, Ebony. Decent salary. I don't know so much about that. Yeah, I know it's 120K to get a pension and all that. But let's break that down for hours that a counselor is dealing for right now, right? Like the amount of hours that this work takes. This is not an 8 to 4 job. At least for the ones of us that care. Like that email is not going to stop at 4 o'clock. That phone call is not going to stop at 5 o'clock. That we've got counselors here who are missing times with their family, who are missing precious time that they'll never see again. Yeah, I'm about to step out in 15 minutes across the street to go sit on my neighbor's couch while she ducks out to go get something she can watch her baby. But for the person that can't be there because they got to go to a public forum to hear a bunch of NIMBYists probably say, like, I don't want this house here, yeah, $120K for the year sounds pretty good, but when I break that down per hour and the type of work, I don't think it's necessarily commensurate. So I just kind of wanted to challenge that respectfully a little bit. Perks, some of those are probably definitely needed. For instance, parking. I got a car and I got to get around. So now out of the $120K a year, or like, what does that work out per hour? Maybe if I'm working I don't know, the average person works 8 to 5, or excuse me, 8 to 4, works 1,850 hours, right? Yeah, your counselor's not working 8 to 4. Your counselor's probably working something like 3,000 hours if they care. So, what does that break down to per hour? I don't know, $30 or something like that. Now you want them to pay like $10 in parking. So now for that hour, that counselor's make $20. I don't know. That's not a gravy train to me. Yeah, sure, a Zoom pass maybe. Yeah, that could be an example of extraneous, unnecessary spending. But some of these I think are legitimate, some are illegitimate. I think the question was about, is it Councillor Thompson who got criminally charged or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah. The charge is definitely worrisome, but we do all benefit from living in a society that you are innocent until proven guilty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we got to keep that in mind. There are no two ways around that, right? It's until he's proven guilty, the presumption is he's innocent. I understand the complexities. I think I understand some of the complexities around, or the intricacies around, allegations of this nature when there's sexual assault, sexual harassment. I understand it's different. I understand the system is unfairly stacked against women. I think I get that as a man. I think I do. But right now we do live in a society where you are innocent until proven guilty. So to answer that, once the courts make their decision, that's when action should be taken. Tracy Cook, the question specifically was, what do we think about her hiring? Can you remind me, please?
No. So the question was, there's a public outcry for her to be fired for her role in the clearing of the encampments. She took full responsibility. She said, don't bother the counselors if you have ire pointed at me. And I'm just wondering how you would respond to this and why.
What she did was extremely worrisome, and I think a lapse in judgment. Is it criminal? Is it reprehensible to the point of someone being fired? I don't know. That's a pretty tall bar. To hire private policing to clear out homeless people is disgusting. Yeah, we can call it that. It's a total lapse in judgment for sure. To create media exclusionary zones, I don't remember this being the People's Republic of China. So I would definitely put Tracy Cook to the task. These public servants are made to answer for their actions before council. So there is the ability to hold her accountable. Again, I think I understand your question being should she be fired? Does public outcry to be fired? I think if we start firing every single public servant because we don't agree with what they've done, what does that say about the public service and our ability to retain quality public service? Because right now we're at a crisis. We can't really attract high quality public servants. Like urban planners, the people right now who are responsible for designing our streets and designing our houses, whatnot, sorry, I was looking at the time here, aren't even applying for jobs here because they can't even freaking afford to live here. It's not like we have a huge luxury here of an abundance of riches here. This is an extremely unaffordable city, So I'm not saying she's got a carte blanche here. I'm not saying because of that is an excuse that justifies her keeping her here. I think the bar should be somewhat higher. I think she should be made to answer for her questions. And as counsellor, I would definitely press her in public, and I would definitely make her squirm in her seat. So that would be my answer to that.
Thank you so much. And your closing, just don't forget to plug your website.
Sorry, what's a website? I'm kidding. It's shackerjamal.ca. Would love for you guys to check it out. My platform's out on there. I think I've got one of the nicest looking platforms. But it's not all just about the graphics designs. I also think I have one of the most fulsome platforms on there. This is kind of what I use to base my answers off of here. So I hope you guys check it out. And I always love hearing feedback from it. Across Toronto right now, we've got a new generation of counselors with fresh new ideas stepping up, right? We have a very unique opportunity at the ward level. Unfortunately, we don't really have that opportunity per se at the mayoral level, considering how the media is representing this, and we all know what effect that will have. But at the municipal level right now, we have a bunch of open seats here. Davenport's one of them. We've got a bunch of great people here. You've had some of them here chatting, from Simon, from myself, to Alejandra, who stepped out, really kind of vying to put forth new ideas. And I represent that new wave here in Davenport, I believe. We need a councillor at City Hall here who's got a progressive vision. This is a progressive ward. This is not a John Tory ward. Take a look at what happened when he decided to, put himself and all of his Rogers spoons behind a candidate here. People weren't too happy. I don't know if Simon can chime in or wants to chime in on that, but that was my read on that situation. And so we need a progressive councillor here with a vision that's rooted in sensible public policy that actually knows what they're saying about, not only from an academic level, but from a professional level. As someone like myself who's worked both at the municipal level as an urban fellow and provincially in public health Ontario, I have that knowledge and I have that experience. So when I talk about these things in their site numbers, they're not just like, a Wikipedia search from like 5 minutes ago. They're actually based on work that I've done. So that's my pitch to the great people of Davenport.
And I want to thank you so much for coming on. And, I fully respect it does take a village to raise and good luck in the campaign. And, I'm excited to see what happens next. I am excited for Ward 9.
Thank you. So before I step out here, Matthew, Ebony, thank you so much for hosting this. I think one of the greatest experiences I've had in this is meeting new people. Like this thing is a freaking slog, and I think Simon can speak to that, and I'll let him speak to that. And there's a lot of ups and downs, and there's a lot of times that my wife has picked me up off the floor. But it's every time that I get to meet someone like you two, and you as well, Simon, it's like, there's some really good people here in Toronto. We've got a lot of freaking problems, but we've got a lot of good people. We've got a lot of people who care. So, thank you for what you guys are doing. Simon, thank you for putting your name forward. Thank you for being someone who, wants to actually facilitate a discussion, which is like literally the bedrock of democracy. And I don't need to tell you that. So I just want to thank you three. And I want to thank Alejandra for all her years of service. So thank you guys. And I'm going to run across the street here and sit on that couch.
Have fun.
All right. See you guys. Bye now.
Bye. Simon, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I suppose the first one would be regarding Councillor Perks. Not the person.
Not the
Councillor
person.
Perks.
Wanted to mention this before, but Shakir just left. But
Yeah.
120,000 is like on the lower end. Counselors do range on their salaries. You can check the sunshine list. But last year Tracy Cook did pull in about 308. There was three more zeros. Okay, 800,000. And then she got 14,000 in benefits after that. So some of them are more paid than others. Agreed that inflation is a thing and we all deserve good rates. But there's just that thought. Now I thought it would be better to say it now so that you can address perks better, knowing that some of them make a lot more money than what was quoted previously.
Yeah, specifically a housing allowance. I suppose every job has its own compensation packages, but really, I don't see how why a specific housing allowance would be needed. As far as the pay itself, municipal jobs pay a lot less than one would think. I told you earlier, I got laid off after the lockdown happened, so I got recalled a couple of years later in May. And they offered me the same money I'm making right now in a job that's totally unrelated to my degree, totally unrelated to my experience in the field of geography and in infrastructure. So that on top of the lengthy commute, I just turned them down. I thought, I can't live on that. That's ridiculous. I definitely think that, we should hold our public servants accountable to make sure that they're not being, just sort of handed money for nothing. But, a counselor who actually does the job well, I think they deserve that money. It's not like people talk about wasteful spending at City Hall, and often it gets framed as these people make too much money. I think it's more about inefficient processes, right? So I alluded to this earlier when I was introducing myself, when I was talking about my experience working within the field of infrastructure, is that I would produce maps, I would produce data, I would produce numbers, and I'd hand them off to whoever was supervising the project at the time, and they would be seemingly lost into the ether for weeks or maybe even months at a time. And maybe at some point later, they would tell me, "Oh, we got a meeting with a counselor tomorrow. We got to get that sorted." And so suddenly it's like, after days of searching around for something to do, I'm just handed this thing that needs to be done within like the next few hours. And I'm thinking, like, this is no way that this is a way to run an operation. So reforming the workplace culture to make things a bit more efficient, to make things a bit more bottom up, and have more initiative from people lower on the totem pole. That's not really something that one counselor can oversee, but it's something that definitely needs to happen. I mean, maybe even just having some kind of protocol, some kind of expectation that after a certain point in the meeting, someone finally says, okay, decision made, done, no more talking, no more back and forth about little fine details, just do it and figure it out as you go along. As far as numbers, I mean, I make a very modest income. I don't quite know if 120K is enough to live on, whatever that means exactly. I mean, is it enough to survive? Well, certainly. Is it enough to have steady housing? Yes, it is. Is it enough to raise a family? That could start to be a bit more of a challenging question. Regarding the charges against Michael Thompson, I don't know the full details of what exactly happened. I just really hope that there is a due process, that the complainants or the alleged victims, or whatever language you want to use, they don't get just dismissed because the person that they're accusing of doing something awful is a powerful politician. They should be investigated the same as anybody else having any kind of sexual improprieties or assault. And I really hope that there wasn't a serious sexual assault, but if there was a serious sexual assault, then there should be criminal penalties. As far as him running for office, there's nothing in the rules that says he shouldn't. Again, I don't know the details of what's alleged or any credibility of what's happened. Naturally, I condemn sexual assault. I think it's an awful thing to do. But just because someone's been accused of something doesn't mean that, that's everything that happened. Okay, so on to the encampment clearings. So again, this is a thing just like the crime question. It requires a bit of nuance. It requires a bit more than just sloganeering. Should the police be beating up and criminalizing homeless people for being homeless? Of course not. There's nothing illegal. There's nothing unethical about being homeless. But like you can't have gone to the Trinity Bellwoods Park when there were people living in the tents there and not seen the kind of mess they made of it, to not know and hear about, maybe even experience firsthand the petty crime that was going on all over the place. The drug paraphernalia that was littered throughout the park, the various stolen property that they piled in heaps. It was a mess, and I definitely think that they shouldn't have just let these people live in the park for an indefinite period of time. But I think it was good that the housing workers actually went through before the encampment clearing and gave them options and said, look, we have some kind of housing for you. We have a motel room, space at a shelter, and most of the encampment residents, they took that option. So the people that were removed by the police in June last year, they were a small holdout among what was left. And like they had thousands of protesters showing up. I remember going through and I was just astounded by the scene that was there, just thousands of people, a massive crowd screaming their heads off. So there had to be some kind of presence to deal with that kind of crowd, especially considering the intensity of the emotion on display. And like I said earlier about sustainable housing and mental health treatment options, like we have people living in the parks because those things don't exist, because our city isn't doing its responsibility to the people who live here, which includes people who are poor, which includes people who have mental health problems, which includes people who don't necessarily get along too well with, I don't know, mainstream society or whatever you want to call it. Like we have a responsibility to them to give them help for whatever problems that lead them to living in a park and being a disturbance to their neighbors. Like these encampments were cleared the week before the city started its day programs for children. Like you can't have little kids walking around stepping on needles. It's not safe and it's not sanitary. And I mean, I didn't feel safe riding my bike through Trinity Bellwoods after dark when those encampments were there, because, you know, who knows who's going to jump out of the woods. And like, I can only imagine how someone who wasn't a young and fit male would have felt. So I think that the encampment clearings were necessary. I don't think, as a general rule, encampment should be illegal, because it doesn't mean just because you live in the park in a tent that you are going to make a mess of the place. And that's why I quite was happy to see that the people in Dufferin Grove, they took good care of the place. Like they had a safe fire. They had clean surroundings. I've never heard any reports of anyone being attacked or any theft or anything like that. But the Trinity Bellwoods encampment was a mess, and you know, people should have been offered you know, some sustainable solution to live in someplace other than the park long before then. As far as Tracy Cook's involvement in that, I don't quite know what her specific involvement in the encampment clearings was, so I can't really comment on that.
Wow, this was great. You know, we did an interview not too long ago. People that are interested can find that on Spotify. This will be going up on YouTube right away tonight. I'd love for you to give a closing statement, and don't forget your website, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah. So my name is Simon Fogel. Website is simonfogeldavenport.ca, and I'm on Twitter at Fogel Davenport. That is my only active social media channel for my campaign. I check it quite regularly. If you've seen it, you can see I have a quite conversational tone on there. So don't expect me to try and filter what I say. I even sometimes weigh in on things that aren't politics, but I try and, you know, I try to keep an open dialogue with the public, let's say.
You know,
even if some of it is me amusing myself by saying things that are absurd.
No, you know what?
Like, I really do think the sirens on the buses idea is a thing that could happen.
You know, I just want to say real quick that I think that's what City Hall is missing. People that are real. People are at City Hall, specifically, you know, the past councils and even the current council. They're watered down. They're maybe programmed.
They're out of touch.
And
they're focus grouped. That's it. Focus group. Yeah.
We need real people to have real conversations, not worry about he said a cuss word, because they focus on the cuss word. They don't focus on, as soon as you cuss, that's what they're going to focus on. They don't focus on anything else that comes out of your mouth. Oh no, he cussed. He needs to step down. I love real people, real conversations. Sometimes it gets heated, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can agree to disagree and still work together, and I love that. But I mean, I don't like the watered downness, the programmed, and what Ebony said. The sorry, what did you say, Ebony?
Oh, I got a bunch of words. You know, stuffy, stiff. You know, outdated. Just like, yeah, wishy-washy, whatever. You know, uptight, kind of out of touch. I feel like we need to be candid, we need to be colorful, and yeah, raw, real, you know, upfront and empathetic. That's the biggest part. I feel like these fat cats, you know, these big wigs, these, you know, bureaucracy robots, they don't understand what it is like to be a everyman Joe, you know, schmo today. Everybody on the front lines of the working force, you know, everyone's struggling, having to work with a partner, like 2 paychecks it takes to rent a home. Like single independent living is almost impossible. Like I don't know what to say. Like, I mean, there's so many implications, especially when it comes to domestic violence survivors, right? Like a great reason for the rooming houses and why they need to be legalized. Young people who are just leaving the home, students, divorcees, bachelors, single moms with children. The fact that we don't have 3 or 4 bedroom apartments for larger families available. It's all just the fact that I'll never own a home, all of that. The idea that people have goals they want to achieve before they want to start a family. Usually, I want to have a nice career. I want to like travel the world. I want to be financially stable. But like, I'm never going to be like, I have kids. I'm a renter. I have kids. That's just the reality of it. I'm probably never going to be able to wait to own my own home. My ovaries will be dust if that was the case. So like, it's people don't understand that, the boomer mentality that like the young kids just need to work harder is not true. We have the odds stacked against us. Millennials and anyone younger, like we all know what it's like these days. The inflation on groceries. When I first stepped out on my own at $20 got me like a week's worth of food. Now I'll be lucky if I get some milk and some ramen noodles for that.
Sorry, Simon, we didn't mean to hijack your closing thoughts. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're talking about colorful characters. Yeah, so I had found someone on Twitter, of course, talking about me a few weeks ago, and they're like, who even is this Fogel guy? Like, does he have any real experience with working with the community? Like, does he have any institutional experience? Like, he's some guy that worked for the city for a few years, and now he's spouting his opinions out, and he's just some random local weirdo. I'm thinking like, great, that's what democracy is. I mean, all the people I've met in this campaign who have been interesting people I've talked to have been local weirdos, people with ideas that you would never consider thinking of before. They would never pop in your head because you just don't have the creativity to even conceive of them. Like I know a guy who talks to me all the time about how we need to foster more puddles, to breed more mosquitoes, because mosquitoes are the foundation layer of an ecosystem. And when mosquitoes die out, the entire ecological everything dies out. And I'm like, he's really onto something there, isn't he? Huh, I would have never thought of that. So this guy, he's a sculptor, and he's commissioned to do some city artwork. So, you meet a lot of very interesting people doing this. So I guess my main takeaways of the campaign are, getting rid of the red tape around housing, especially these artificial restrictions on supply, which are generating increasing costs to living here. And that's our number one priority, is making sure that people can afford to live here. And I think much of the solution is simply getting the government out of the way, because I'm not going to make any specific accusations, but I think it's awfully convenient that these billion-dollar developer corporations that are financing many campaigns and had a lot of influence within government are, as a result of restrictions on construction and on new housing supply through zoning, they're the ones who soak up the vast majority of the leftover demand. They benefit financially in a huge way from our current zoning restrictions. On transit, I'd like to see, more service improvements, more ways to speed up and make more efficient bus service, like queue jumps, signal priority, even full-on bus rapid transit. Just these small deliverables add up, because we're bogged down so much on these years-long debates that soak up billions of dollars about what big ambitious capital project is going to get built that never gets built, because it's just too big of a thing to do. I mean, it's kind of like if you have 10 small things, you're more likely to get 6 or 7 of them done than if you have one big thing and you get it done or you don't, right? So the math at the end is either you have 7 of the thing or you have 0 of a thing, and maybe if you really do it right, you get 10 of the thing. I think we should go for the 7 and not the 10, because it's more feasible. I mean, and it will snowball into a more big picture idea, but in the meantime, just simple service improvements will go a long way to getting more people moving around. Regarding mental health treatment, it's absolutely tragic. It's an absolute waste of human potential that we just have such a patchwork of services that when you need help, you can't access it, that you get some emergency crisis management for now, but as far as the rest of your life, it's kind of like, well, you're on your own. And it's like, well, I can't even manage my life to begin with. How am I supposed to manage the bureaucracy of figuring out how to, how to access all this stuff, let alone how to pay for it, because the therapy is very expensive. When I worked for the city, I had a great benefits package, but therapy was the only thing that wasn't on it. And guess what? The only thing I needed was therapy. So, it's like, oh, my teeth are fine. I don't need a dentist. My eyes are fine. I don't need the vision care. But, to talk to a therapist about what's going on in my brain, like, that costs me money. So there's a huge problem with access to mental health treatment that, the city needs to step in and intervene, not from an ethical perspective, less per se, because I think that kind of framing, it's too idealistic, right? It doesn't get things done. We should simply think of it as a matter of, okay, practicalities, right? If people can't manage their own lives and they can't contribute to society. And so they'll get more mental health treatment available if we frame it like that. And it's the same way with housing affordability, it's the same way with transit, it's the same with park services. Like, Shakur is great, Shakur, sorry. He's great at hammering on about the declining value for money that we get out of park services. And that's a huge thing, right? We shouldn't have park services because parks are nice. We should have park services because we already pay for them and currently we're not receiving them. And the things that are on offer are continually eroding. Like you go to the Dufferin Grove Pizza, community pizza oven, it used to be free to access it. Now you have to pay $100 and register ahead of time, right? You have the fire pits in the park. They should be free to access because we already built and paid for them. No, you got to get a permit. You got to sign up for it. You got to pay permit fees. It's the same with recreation programs, with the swimming pools, there's a lot of nickels and dimes that add up to real money and real headaches and real hassles to accessing the services in our city that we have a right to access as people who pay taxes and as citizens who live here, contribute to our communities and contribute to our society. So if you want, less government micromanage and more government build stuff, then I'm the guy to vote for.
Thank you so much, Simon. And I mean, like I said before, when Shakur was exiting, I give you guys all the credit in the world for putting your name on the ballot, and that takes guts. And I'm in awe of everyone that did that, who stepped forward and put their name on the ballot. I'm excited for the city of Toronto. I'm excited for Ward 9. I can't wait to see what happens. We have a lot of fresh new candidates with bold ideas, fresh ideas, because we're all here for the same reason, and that is the status quo is not working. Otherwise, we would just vote for the incumbent, and it's not happening because we don't agree. And so I love that. Ebony, do you have anything to add before we wrap this up?
I want to jump in here. Have you ever seen that meme that's floating around the last little while? A picture of an overflowing garbage bin that says it's got a vote for John Tory branding on it.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, John Tory's campaign sign.
Yeah, I saw that.
Time to take the trash out, I guess. Anyways, something new and fresh is certainly what's needed. And we've heard from so many different candidates. And I think that we had a really great conversation today. I feel like some really important points were hit on. And no matter which one of you wins, your community is going to be better served. So thank you for coming today. And we really appreciate you spending the time. Putting your name out there. And most importantly, just serving the people.
Thank you.